I really appreciate your patience. I tried to post about the subject that I'm going to talk about today, which is antidepressant medications, and it kept failing to post. And so I took that as a sign that I needed to go deeper. And after this video, I'm going to go into how to heal your brain after antidepressants. I was prescribed them in 2017 for OCD, generalized anxiety, and depression, which I no longer deal with, thanks to myself, not the antidepressants. I discontinued use in 2020, so that means I was on them for about 2.5 years. Psychiatric medications, I found out recently, are typically not tested for more than a year, and that's a problem because the uh, insane the insane amount of people who are prescribed these medications are typically on them for 5 years or more. So if we are taking a medication and we don't know the long-term effects of it, this can cause damage to different parts of the brain and the body. So antidepressants, Prozac in particular, caused me ADHD, and it worsened my insomnia. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm finding it difficult to want to talk about anything else until I address this. So this is an essay I wrote about the low abuse potential and the high risk of insanity of antidepressant medications. All of the citations will be in a document linked in the description, so feel free to open those and read as you wish. It is apparent that substances with high abuse for potential share commonalities within either opioid, such as fentanyl or heroin, NMDA reception, such as in ketamine and dextromethorphan, dopamine anandamide combination, such as in marijuana, or GABAergic pathways, such as benzodiazepines, if the substance is an analgesic downer, 5-HT2A reception, and dopaminergic signaling, such as LSD, MDMA, cocaine, and amphetamines, and stimulants. Though quite different, kaleidoscopic euphoria and temporary freedom from anxiety and depression is the shared factor amongst all of these pathways. Antidepressants have a low abuse potential due to emotional blunting, sexual dysfunction, and exacerbation of insomnia, side effects which are antithetical to an enhanced quality of life. These effects are likely explained by the suppression and imbalance on the dopaminergic reward pathway. There is an inverse relationship between serotonin, or 5-HT, and dopamine, or DA. Side effects associated with the majority of SSRIs, prominently in Eli Lilly's popular fluoxetine, or Prozac, run adjacent to this downregulation of DA and blockage of the 5-HT2A receptor. Anxiety, agitation, diminished sex drive, and homicidal and suicidal ideation and behavior are discussed further in this paper. Lower abuse potential of SSRIs may also be correlated with the neurotoxicity involved within the pineal gland, preventing the serotonergic conversion to melatonin. An interrupted serotonin-melatonin conversion disrupts sleep, causing or worsening insomnia. The results of an interrupted circadian rhythm are lasting mood and cognitive declination, implying depression, anxiety, and aggression. Research is not lacking but largely concealed in the area of negative effects of antidepressant medications, just as lacking is legal regulation on gain-of-function research. Pharmaceutical companies fund research institutions, thus greatly obscuring reliability of these studies. Caution must be taken not to assume medications containing highly neurotoxic ingredients to serve the purpose advertised. Black box warnings on worsening suicidality and new homicidal thoughts, combined with the plethora of homicides carried out by individuals with no previous history of violence, confirmed by news stories and legal settlements paid off by parent companies, further implicate severe neurotoxicity surrounding antidepressants as well as extensive concealment within the research domain. High abuse potential substances. The most heavily abused substances in the past 50 years include alcohol, cocaine, nicotine, marijuana, benzodiazepines, and amphetamines. The commonality between all of these is that they induce dimensions of euphoria that vary between the mechanisms of action. The euphoria induced by cocaine, nicotine, and amphetamines involve the dopamine system involved in risk versus reward seeking, inducing a significant elevation of focus and confidence devoid of anxiety. The euphoria of benzodiazepine state acts through the gamma aminobutyric acid or GABA pathway, specifically GABA A, inhibiting the excitation of glutamate, therefore inciting a deep sense of analgesia and is highly attractive to those with anxiety disorders. Alcohol incites euphoria through its action on the 5-HT3A and GABA receptors. Contradictory effects of antidepressants and the implications. SSRIs, SRIs, and SNRIs. The lacking abuse of antidepressants is found in their inhibitory nature of the DA pathway, resulting in the contradictory nature. Substances with high abuse potentials, particularly of the stimulant kind, such as LSD, cocaine, and amphetamines, not only incite a blissful sense of well-being and confidence to the user, but incite a temporary yet effective erasure of anxiety and depression. Regardless of the classification, the commonality is found within the DA activation. Aside from obsessive compulsive disorder, major depressive disorder, or MDD, is the condition for which antidepressants are intended and prescribed. The symptoms of MDD include apathy, oversleeping, or insomnia, blunted emotions, and inability to experience pleasure or anhedonia, loss of pleasure in activities that normally or previously brought joy, and sexual dysfunction. Interestingly, the most common dissatisfactory side effects of antidepressants include anhedonia, according to Shelton and Tamark in 2001, McMakin et al. 2012, Cow et al. 2019, as cited in Cow in 2023. Suicidality, Lee et al. 2022, increased anxiety, sleep issues, sexual dysfunction, emotional blunting, and impaired memory, learning, and executive function, Cow in 2023. The shocking abundance of empirical citations on cognitive and emotional decline following the prescription of SSRIs and similar medications is highly disturbing for a medication widely prescribed and entrusted with its efficacy that is unsupported by empirical evidence. 5-HT and DA opponency. By the way, the first passage of this paper, I did not cite the in-text citations, but as we get deeper into the paper where I'm making, more hefty claims, I will state them. I didn't do it at the beginning because it's a bit redundant, but like I said, all the citations are in the document below. SSRIs, SRIs, and SNRIs are likely the only drugs that act on 5-HT independently of dopamine. Findings have demonstrated serotonin's functional associations with aversion and punishment. Dakin, 1983, Dakin and Graf, 1991, behavioral inhibition, Soubrier, 1986, which contrasts evidence found on the functions of dopamine correlated to processing of reward, Schultz, 1998, as cited in Kakade et al., 2002. Psychomotor activity, Canales and Iverson, 2000, Waddington, 1989, as cited in Kakade et al., 2002, and approach behavior, Everett et al., 1999, Ekamoto and Panksepp, 1999, as cited in Kakade et al., 2002. Kakade et al. 2002 analyzed serotonin's potential role in opponency to dopamine in the context of average case reinforcement learning. Though limited to short-term rather than long-term observation, opponency was found in both full terror signal and opponent channels between 5-HT and DA, as seen in Figure 5, which will be included as well. Considering the limitations of the study, in addition to the complex relationship between these two neurotransmitters implied by Parsons and Justice 1993 and Zangin et al. 2001, where a surge within the accumbens of 5-HT also surged DA, there are numerous studies to confirm opponency between 5-HT and DA. In a more extensive study, 5-HT agonism contradicted behaviors involved in conditioning, thus relational to dopamine, further showing DA agonism has the same oppositional effect. Fletcher et al. 1995, Ming and Higgins 1993, Fletcher and Korth 1999, as cited in Kakade et al. 2002. An inverse relationship between serotonin and dopamine were found at the ventral tangential area, or the VTA, as well as the substantia nigra, the areas of dopaminergic signaling, which include the striatum and the nucleus accumbens, Kapoor and Remington 1996. Additional pharmacological findings demonstrations of 5-HT and DA opponency, where an administration of amphetamines incited immediate decrease of serotonin. Segal 1976, Lucky and Harvey 1979. Thus, despite the setbacks implied in the surge of gain-of-function research in the modern day, and therefore the value of current research, it can be safely propagated that SSRIs and similar medications antagonize dopamine. This is a problem, particularly when treating chronic and severe disorders of the mood. This is where I'm going to tell you that if you are sensitive to violence, you might want to click off. I will put a timestamp to where you can skip, but I highly suggest that you don't, because this is one of the most important aspects of the evidence to support antidepressants and being dangerous drugs. This dangerous negation of the dopaminergic system implicated in the mechanism of SSRIs, as well as the antagonism of the 5-HT2A receptor, further distinguishing this class of drugs from those more widely abused, is found in the concerning amount and magnitude of cases of individuals newly prescribed SSRIs who demonstrated homicidal behavior with no prior history, detailed in 9 cases. Cases 1 and 7 were highly significant, described below. Case 1 involved DS, the initials of the individual to protect privacy, prescribed 20 milligrams of paroxetine or Paxil following a failed attempt with Prozac. 2 days following this new prescription, his infant-age granddaughter, his daughter, and his wife took 3 bullets each preceding DS's suicide. Healy et al. 2006 added, quote, "At jury trial in Wyoming in June 2001, instigated by DS's surviving son-in-law, a jury found that paroxetine can cause some people to become homicidal and or suicidal. SmithKline-Beecham was deemed 80% responsible for the ensuing events. The documentary evidence included an unpublished company study of incidents of serious aggression in 80 patients, 25 of which involved homicide. Experts for the plaintiff suggested that the mechanism through which paroxetine contributed to these events was probably akathisia or psychosis. A central problem in such contexts is that the takers of the medication often fail to recognize the fact that the state they are in is drug-induced and that discontinuing treatment can alleviate the symptoms," end quote. Case 7 discussed an incident involving JB, a chronic sufferer of anxiety and depression, 10 years married. His wife periodically replaced the contents of his long-term prescription of doxepin with sugar, prompted by her fears of side effects. She admitted this to her husband, as well as JB's new psychiatrist. This prescription was replaced by 10 milligrams of fluoxetine, which is the lowest milligram dosage you can take, by the way. It's usually only 10 milligrams is usually only prescribed if you have never taken the medication before and you are just starting. And this is what my psychiatrist did with me. 1 month following this change, JB's stern mistrust and angst became increasingly more irate, convinced of her unfaithfulness, so paranoia. His irrationality caused his wife to get rid of his gun, requesting the psychiatrist to try a new medication. He refused and continued taking the medication as prescribed. JB's friends confirmed his stark shift from a once passive nature to a paranoid, hypervigilant one. The accusatory and aggravated thoughts toward others began spiraling into delusions. Not only was JB convinced of his wife's plot for his murder, he perceived a potential attack, with no external evidence of such, when at his mother's gravesite. Not too long after, in October 1994, his neighbors called the police after he mentioned an attack by his wife. Inside the home, soaking in her own blood on the hallway floor, she was found inflicted by 200 stab wounds. It is clear that antidepressants antagonize those neurotransmitters involved with any degrees of joy, reward-seeking, or pleasure. This is a severe contradiction to the intention of healing anxiety and depression, whose sometimes lethal consequences proliferate on a yearly basis internationally in the modern day. Individuals seeking the human experience of joy, which are deserved by all, are not at fault for seeking illicit drugs with consideration to the blatant failure of pharmaceutical companies implied by Eli Lilly and SmithKline Beecham. Discussion. A more personal note on antidepressants leads me to briefly discuss 3 years I spent consistently taking 20 milligrams of Prozac, prescribed for anxiety, depression, and OCD. What I once perceived as depression was merely the human condition of transition from adolescence into adulthood. Therapy proved ineffective several times. I soon found that Prozac incited a sort of hyperactive marriage of agitation and voided emptiness, which disbarred me from writing poetry, my original antidepressant of choice. Instead, I became social at my own expense. My self-awareness diminished rapidly, which only served as a means for confusion during hour-long crying spells that were incited due to my lack of feeling anything at all, combined with my inability to think independently. The experience was equivalent to the transformation of human into a walking abyss. Eventually, my impulsivity and lacking emotional permanence led me to a physically abusive relationship. The erasure of my emotional permanence made it easy to repeat these cycles while remaining unable to store memories of fear. So, when these cycles arose, anger was not too much of an issue. Dolls, robots, and perhaps computers experienced more complex emotionality than I at the time. The only time I felt human during the prescription were the days I microdosed LSD. Otherwise, every aspect of passion had fallen by the wayside and dissipated in less than 1 year. In addition to this, after taking 1 dose of DXM-based cough syrup for a cold, I experienced a sudden onset of akathisia, where I was unable to sit down for over 2 hours, accompanied by worsened suicidal thoughts, which I was unaware was serotonin syndrome. After discontinuing use cold turkey in a pursuit of regaining my sense of self and basis of reality, I noted a newfound inability to concentrate that was not present prior to the Prozac. My emotions and cognition were entirely damaged for over a year after discontinuation, and it took 4 years to regain my dream recall. Now I am dependent on an amphetamine, which is surprisingly more effective than the SSRI at mitigating all of my symptoms: OCD, anxiety, and depression. This, in addition to aspects of my thoughts that became extremely disturbing while under the influence of Prozac, not discussed here, indicates that antidepressants possess a low potential for abuse due to their antagonism with dopamine, the inhibition of the 5-HT2A receptor, and the resulting emotional blunting that proves them ineffective for any potential use, aside from turning the world from colored to bleak and erasing one's consciousness. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to another essay that I wrote that discusses the potential, in my mind it's definitive, but potential correlation between antisocial personality disorder and dysfunctions of the pineal gland. So we see a lot of information about the pineal gland involved in consciousness. And the reason why is because the serotonin receptors, the 7 of them that we have, they all have different functions. And the effects of their reuptake, the blocking of their reuptake, can appear in very different ways depending on the receptor. It's me from a few days later after filming this. I did leave a few important points out that I want to clear up. SSRIs downregulate the 5-HT2A receptor while agonizing the 5-HT1A receptor, causing an overall diminishment of neuronal activity. It is said that long-term intake of the SSRI will decrease the anxiolytic effects that this causes, thus resulting in elevated levels of serotonergic activity in the synaptic cleft over time. The problem is that even if this were the case, it still remains that this mechanism of action is dangerous and ineffective, particularly for mood disorder, with consideration to DA antagonism, downregulation of the 5-HT2A receptor, which is positively correlated with heightened mood and increased empathy and sociability, as well as the potentiation of depressant effects of the 5-HT1A receptor and elevated risk for serotonin syndrome. Serotonin syndrome is characterized by akathisia, racing thoughts, suicidal thoughts, aggression, irritability, seizures, and in some cases, death. Additionally, serotonin levels fail to address the complexity of factors associated with anxiety and depression and do not necessarily play a significant role at all. These one-dimensional drugs fail to take into account physiological factors such as diet, exercise, lacking sun exposure, hormones, and inflammation inside the brain and body, as well as external factors such as socioeconomic status, past trauma, and ongoing social conflicts. Carry on. Every substance, the way it acts on these channels is going to appear significantly differently. So just because you have a substance like LSD or psilocybin acting on the 5-HT2A receptor, it's going to look significantly different if you activate that through antidepressants, because there's the mechanism of action is more complex than that. So the serotonin-melatonin conversion is the basis of consciousness. When we enter a sleep state, when we enter a dream state, this is a doorway to the inner world. And the inner world is essentially the consciousness that gives us the morality and the ethical belief system that we either do or don't possess as human beings. So what I'm talking about here is the potential correlation between antisocial personality disorder and the dysfunction of the pineal gland. And then it'll become a lot easier to see why it is that I believe antidepressants cause antisocial behavior. And I'm going to define all these terms in just a moment. So this was formatted like a study, and there's parts of this paper that are not relevant, so I'm not going to get into that. But when I refer to this paper as a study, that's why. So disregard that. So here we go. Potential causation of pineal gland dysfunction in antisocial personality disorder. This study will attempt to investigate potential causation between dysfunction of the pineal gland, noted in abnormally low baseline levels of serotonin, 5-HT, and MLT or melatonin, noted in sleep disorders, to antisocial personality disorder or ASPD. Findings may serve as major caveats in delineating current gaps in research, as well as effectively treating and preventing callous and amoral tendencies of ASPD. This study will entail 3 phases: 2 self-report surveys pointing to potential insomnia and ASPD symptoms, fMRI brain scans on gray matter and amygdala activity, and blood testing on 5-HT and MLT levels. Any neuroscientist who watches this, if you need a study to carry out, I highly suggest this because this needs to be done. Just saying. Characteristics of ASPD. Prominent factors of ASPD distinguishing it from its cluster B counterparts include trait aggression, sadism, vindictiveness, fearlessness, Cleckley 1941 as cited in Crego and Whittaker 2016, criminality, substance abuse, Gibbon et al. 2020, compulsive lying, lack of morality, childhood conduct disorder, genetic inheritance, adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, lack of shame or remorse, impulsivity, and lack of empathy demonstrated in superficial relationships with others for the strict purpose of personal gain, Wong 2023. Regarding genetic inheritance, Wong 2023 confirmed associations with several genes, including SLC6A4, COMLT, 5-HTR2A, TPH1, DRD2, OXTR, CAC, NG8, COL25A1, and several serotonergic genes. While many individuals displaying consistent attributes of this personality disorder may not necessarily always outwardly harm others through stealing or physical violence as stereotyped, the tendency to discard the safety, health, and general consideration of others in the personal domain are significantly higher than other individuals regardless of neurodivergence. These personalities exist at the detriment to society, a threat to innate human empathy. The function of the pineal gland, serotonin-melatonin conversion. The 17th century philosopher René Descartes identified the pineal gland as the seat of the soul. The pineal gland, or epiphysis cerebri, is the gland wherein serotonin-melatonin conversion occurs, Elahi 2023. The pineal gland has adapted its spiritual connotations to one of the brain's most imperative areas, identified as a photoneuroendocrine transducer, facilitating the circadian rhythm, mediating internal biochemical processes with the external world. Stell et al. 2011, as cited in Gibbon 2019. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, derived from the amino acid tryptophan. Serotonin's central function has been said to serve as an anxiolytic, Dakin 2013, as cited in Carhart-Harris and Nutt 2017, contributing to behavioral associations with patients. Miyazaki et al. 2012, as cited in Carhart-Harris 2017, via postsynaptic 5-HT1AR signaling. Moreover, Feldhaus et al. 2021 suggested associations between central serotonergic dysfunction with impulsive aggression, Fanning et al. 2021, as cited in Feldhaus et al. 2021. Serotonin transporter gene polymorphisms have also been linked to personality traits related to aggression, neuroticism, and impulsivity. Retz et al. 2004, as cited in Siegel and Crockett 2013. Elahi 2023 identified the process of acetylation and methylation that synthesize melatonin. In the absence of light, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN, produces glutamate, facilitating the signal's transmission of PVN to the pineal gland, Arendt 2022. Melatonin possesses immense neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory properties, alleviating cadmium-induced liver injury, Cao, Fang, Liu et al. 2017, and diminishing early brain injury induced by subarachnoid hemorrhage. Ryder et al. 2015. According to Parabello et al. 2022, quote, "We found that when given the opportunity to administer high or low punishments to opponents in the Taylor aggression task, participants who ingested melatonin selected high punishments more frequently than those who ingested placebo, This finding is in line with animal studies showing that endogenous and exogenous melatonin increases resident intruder aggression. Jasnow et al. 2000, uh, Demas et al. 2004, Wang et al. 2012, and with the clinical studies suggesting that elevating bioavailability of melatonin by medical interventions in human patients increases aggressiveness. Hoffman's et al. 2001, Hill et al. 2014, paragraph 19. Parabello 2022 displays 11 studies observing aggression changes in fish and rodents when administered exogenous melatonin. Outcomes demonstrated contradicting results, even accounting for controlled and uncontrolled variants. The study regrettably does not account for human behavior. Combined with the overemphasis on observed correlations between heightened melatonin and aggression, with lacking acknowledgments of contrasting results, the conclusions are rendered questionable. It should be taken into account that the animals were put into resident intruder situations that would normally elicit aggression regardless of exogenous melatonin administration. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Additionally, if melatonin heightens aggression, the subject perceives their life is at risk. MLT's neuroprotective properties could very well serve as an enhancement to instinctual survival. The question as to whether or not lacking melatonin could result in aggression and impulsivity when it is uncalled for, as observed in ASPD, still remains in question. Serotonin mechanisms positively correlate to prosocial behaviors, such as cooperation, while negatively correlating with antisocial behaviors such as aggression and social isolation. Duday et al. 2005, Knudsen et al. 1998, as cited in Siegel and Crockett 2013, surmised as likely precursors to human mortality. Stevens et al. 2001, as cited in Siegel and Crockett 2013. These studies fall short of identifying the functions of the 7 serotonin receptors. The variations, though undefined, prove significant. An example of this can be observed in starkly contrasting effects across psychedelics, such as N-dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, psilocybin, and lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, exciting differing serotonin receptors, accounting for their starkly contrasting effects. In consideration to the established links between poor sleep quality with aggression and impulsivity, Comfuis et al. 2011, 2 central features of the disorder, a potential correlate may be drawn to dysfunction within the pineal gland and ASPD. Serotonin's direct conversion to melatonin points to a central function of the pineal gland. Gebben et al. 2019 points to the prominence of an observation from Pement 2013 regarding a rare mutation of the monoamine oxidase A, or the MAOA gene on the X chromosome. This abnormality was consistent throughout men in a Dutch family who demonstrated extreme antisocial behaviors, including sexual and physical violence. Merriman and Cameron 2007, Rain 2006. MAOA synthesizes the MAO enzyme that functions to disintegrate monoamine neurotransmitters dopamine and serotonin. Abnormally heightened levels of these neurotransmitters would then be the result of a dysfunctional MAO enzyme, a proven cause for aggression and violence. Merriman and Cameron 2007, as cited in Pement 2013. The argument of potential causation of either lowered or heightened 5-HT or MLT is not at all clear-cut, as this is just one area of the brain involved in the complexity of this problematic personality disorder. Potential pineal gland dysfunction may parallel established links between ASPD with reduced intracranial gray matter, Rain et al. 2000, Yang et al. 2017, and depressed amygdala activity, Kava et al. 2020. Despite the time-tested correspondence between reduced amygdala activity and ASPD combined with findings detailing connections between elevated serotonin and melatonin to aggression and impulsivity, research has yet to draw consistent conclusions delineating causality between lowered serotonin and melatonin, as noted in the subjects with sleep and depressive disorders, to ASPD. Accounting for studies detailing correlates between poor sleep quality related to insomnia, Studies suggest strong links between heightened melatonin with aggression and impulsivity are not reliable or convincing. Interruptions in circadian rhythm links to aggression and impulsivity. So I just want to clear some things up because this is it's very contradictory, the findings that you read, and we know gain of function research is probably everything we read, damn near. So what I'm trying to say is that we have all of these studies. We have like piles and piles of these studies that are talking about the potential causality of aggression with heightened melatonin and serotonin. Okay, so when you have an aggressive individual, what's the first thing that's prescribed? 9 times out of 10. Antidepressants. What do antidepressants do? They block the reuptake of serotonin in your brain so that more serotonin is available in the cleft. All right. So then we're having a very difficult time. I mean, there's no studies. If you can find one, please tell me, please show me. But there's nothing that discusses the potential causation of aggression and the other symptoms of this disorder with lowered levels of serotonin and melatonin. So then now we're talking about the effects of sleep deprivation and how that affects someone's mood and behavior. So if you have elevated serotonin levels, unless you're taking antidepressants, I'll get to that in a second, there is more serotonin available to be converted to melatonin. You can only produce so much melatonin as you have serotonin. Okay. So when you're taking something like an antidepressant, it blocks the conversion between serotonin and melatonin. How do I say that so confidently? I don't need a study to tell me that because myself and several people that I know, horrendous sleep quality on antidepressants. So I actually don't care about anything I read. That's when I stop looking into what I can read because you have to understand what is consistently true, right? And also what may be deceptive for the purpose of what? Money. So here we go with the interruptions in circadian rhythm and the links to aggression and impulsivity. If you get good sleep at night, the odds of you having issues with aggression and anger and your mood significantly diminish. What does that tell you? Right? Okay. Confoys et al. 2011 discussed how short or disrupted sleep and disturbed control of aggression could be a prevalent correlate in subjects with prominent dispositional anger trait as observed in antisocial personality disorder, page 329. Confoys et al. 2011 detailed a confounding study measuring ASPD subjects in relation to their sleep quality. Quote, 19 male psychiatric patients with ASPD, diagnosed ASPD, who committed violent crimes, exhibited significantly more nighttime awakenings and consequently lower sleep efficiency than control subjects. These results remained after correction for alcoholism, sleep deprivation, and head injuries. So we're not accounting for those, right? Those are separate, not factors here. The ASPD patients who had more SWS, which is supposed to be the most refreshing part of sleep, despite this, they had lower self-reported sleep quality. No differences in rapid eye movement sleep parameters were found. A higher amount of SWS was also observed in 3 female psychiatric patients with ASPD, also charged for violent crimes. End quote, page 329. Okay. Gray matter depletion, depressed amygdala activity, and ASPD. Piment 2013 demonstrated the prominence of gray matter as a factor in ASPD in reference to a study by Rain et al. 2000. A great study, by the way, you should read it if you're interested in the subject. Quote, of the APD, which is what ASPD was referred to in this particular study, it's the same thing. Of the APD group used by Rain and his team, 52.4% of them reported having assaulted a stranger. 42.9% of them were guilty of rape. 38.1% were guilty of firing a gun at someone, and 28.6% of them were guilty of attempted or completed homicide. Using magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, Rain et al. 2000 found that a prefrontal gray matter was reduced by about 11% in comparison to the control group. This represents a substantial absence in gray matter in the prefrontal regions of those with APD and indicates that a serious developmental abnormality must have occurred to prevent these areas from growing. Deficits in frontal gray matter were also correlated with a reduction in autonomic function. Rain et al. 2000 divided the APD group, along with the median value for gray matter volume, into a high prefrontal gray group and a low prefrontal gray group. They found that the low prefrontal gray group had a reduction in galvanic skin response, your aura, the electromagnetic frequency that radiates off the surface of your skin, which is what I was referring to before when I told you that this is used in science, but yet we're not taught about it. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's not real. It's pseudoscience. It's clearly not. When discussing their antisocial and often criminal behavior, there was no difference in heart rate, however. So you have people who have a clear, distinctive, measurable, diminished frequency emitting off the surface of their skin, which, that is centered around your heart. This is the toroidal field. That is a donut-shaped field that extends around your body. The center of it is your heart, okay? So think about not only the science, but think about the higher implications of this in consciousness, right? Okay. So, reduce galvanic skin response when discussing their antisocial and criminal behavior. No difference in heart rate, of course. With the absence of such a significant portion of gray matter in the frontal lobe, one can only wonder at other functional deficits that could be present, especially in executive functioning and working memory, end quote, paragraphs 10 to 11. So, when we see all these studies that, listen, okay, let me actually start on a different note. When I was doing a bit of research for a different paper about psychedelics compared to antidepressants, you will see, inevitably, many studies that will claim there's been no proof, no evidence for a greater or equal efficacy of psychedelics to antidepressants, and it will straight up tell you that the efficacy of antidepressants has been demonstrated. This is not true. This is just simply not true. And then when you look at the other studies that involve heightened serotonin and heightened melatonin levels and how they may be correlated with aggression, I can see this in specific instances of serotonin syndrome, which the body is not equipped to handle extremely heightened levels of serotonin. So when you mix antidepressants and alcohol, for instance, this is when aggressive behavior will occur. Of course, understandable, right? But there's a certain threshold that the same can be true when the serotonin levels and the melatonin levels fall too low, right? And so then, in addition to that, you have a whole other component of this where, as we see in antidepressants like Prozac, just because your serotonin is getting increased in the synaptic cleft, that does not mean that you're just going to produce more melatonin and everything's fine. There can be interruptions, especially when you're dealing with neurotoxins. and neurotoxins are present in every medication. It's just a matter of what are the negative effects and do they outweigh the positive effects? Okay? That's why I'm able to comfortably be on a prescription medication, because there are no negative effects, right? Probably being cold is the only one. But there is no nuance many times when you're looking at these studies. And it's very frustrating because we're trying to learn about our brains and we want to know how to avoid feeling like we're going insane or actually going insane. Those are things that are very that's something that is very sought after, to avoid going insane or to get out of it. And when I say insane, I don't necessarily mean psychosis, but this can absolutely lead to psychosis, having too much or too little serotonin in your brain. So I'm frustrated because consciousness is the center of why I even make these videos to begin with. Elevating your consciousness, because I experienced a horrendous state of mind, a hellish state of mind, when I hardly had a reason to throughout my entire life, up until I, one, found out that I had a major food allergy that was causing inflammation to my brain, and taking steps to mitigate that through exercise, through various supplements, through acknowledging certain nutritional deficiencies. And that's the next video I'm going to make. But if I talk about that now, this video is going to be 2 hours long, and I don't even think it'll upload that. So I want to help other people elevate their own consciousness, just like I have. But I can't just talk at you about myself if I do that. I need to tell you about why these things matter and what is being said. The kinds of thoughts that I had running through my head, while they were no longer the same the same obsessions that I had before, lifelong, because I showed symptoms of OCD as young as 3 years old. I had compulsions that I did every single day since then, maybe even before, who knows. But to think that there was a worse state of mind that could also delude me into believing that I was feeling better. And that's the reason I was on them for almost 3 years, is because they do delude you into believing that you're doing better. Meanwhile, I shouldn't say you, because then that's not right. I personally, and many others, experienced a complete diminishment, to the point where it's easy to say it was gone, of my consciousness. What do I mean by that? Imagine you are feeling sad and angry, and all you can do is cry, but you can't think about it. It's not that you don't want to. You once were able to. At one time, you were able to do that. But with this medication, slowly but surely, you stop being able to introspect. Introspection is how we gain self-awareness. Introspection is the reason why we are able to identify and solve our own problems without having to constantly ask other people who don't know what we're going through. Right? And that's insight. That is innate insight that we all have the potential and the ability to possess. I don't think it is a mistake that the same neurochemical that is responsible for sleep, the same neurochemical that is the precursor to melatonin, is the one that is enacted upon during spiritual ascension, in psychedelics, in meditation even, because psychedelics are by no means the only way to elevate your consciousness. It's just an example, and it's what actually enabled me to identify these issues. It is no mistake that that is the same, that molecule is the precursor to the chemical that enables us to not only fall asleep and recharge our bodies, which is arguably the most important function of the human body. We see people doing 3-month fasts where they're not eating any food. They don't die. The human body is built for starvation. Look at how many famines we've had. But they sleep. So they live. And they are fine. Their bodies are able to regenerate themselves because they are sleeping. It doesn't take long to die of sleep deprivation. Not sleeping at all. Another thing that goes on to this is my dream recollection. I, at one time, recalled every single night's dream for almost 10 years of my life. Prozac. It didn't even take 1 year for me to stop dreaming. And you might say, we all dream. Whether you remember it or not, we all dream. I disagree. Because if you never reach that depth of sleep, and people say dreaming is bad, it means you're not sleeping. No, quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. If you are dreaming, you're sleeping just fine. It takes a very deep state of sleep to recall your dreams. I don't care what you read. I really don't. Because how many times have we been lied to? The aura is pseudoscience. That's pathetic. That's galvanic skin response. That's electrodermal activity that they've studied in seizure patients, epilepsy. And it was effective. Biofield practice was effective. Activating your parasympathetic nervous system through your breath and through joy and tranquility is just as effective, if not more, than medication for epilepsy patients. Yes, I will link that below too. If we lose our ability to dream, both physiologically and metaphorically, we are nothing but walking meat suits who are simply acting upon our own carnal desires, our own egoistic desires, and that may hurt other people, and it likely will, whether you are aware of it or not. While not everyone who will take antidepressant medications will end up killing their spouse or shooting up a school, that's not the point. The diminishment of consciousness is happening through several channels in society, whether it is through the media we consume, the food we consume, which is not really food, the antidepressant medications that are present in the water, as well as every other medication you can think of under the sun, birth control, neurotoxins like fluoride, which is a neurotoxin and it is present in the water and it does diminish IQ. And we can stop lying as a country. If you are one of these people that goes around doubting everything, questioning everything, but not to learn, but you question that which is outside of conventional websites that you read off of. If it's not written by an expert, you don't trust it. And that's a problem. Because we are not told that these medications have not been tested on anyone for more than a year tops in a formal setting. It's not just about losing your dreams or losing your emotions, it's about losing your consciousness. And if you are trying to mitigate anxiety, depression, or any other mental illness, that's destruction. That is further collateral damage. Thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. I very much appreciate you. I don't ask you to like or subscribe to me. I don't really care. But if you are here and you do those things, I appreciate you. Thank you for sticking around. I'm not sure if I said that at the beginning, but thank you for sticking around. I have had a lot happen this year, good and bad and strange. Eye infection, grief, but a lot of beautiful things too, so it's okay. That's why I'm back, because it's okay, you know? So I hope you're doing well, and the next video I do will be how to heal your brain after antidepressants, and how to mitigate anxiety and depression. That's going to be a little risky because I know there's going to, I don't know anything for fact, but there may or may not be people who are angry about the notion that that's even possible. But I believe that it is because I've lived it. So I'm going to share those things, and if they help even one person, that's the reason why I'm doing it. I'm not trying to be popular. I was trying to be popular, I'm not even going to go there. But I hope you have a gorgeous day or night wherever you are, and if you have depression or anxiety, you can email me, and I will do my best to give you any advice or just give you an ear to listen. And I'm open to discussion, so take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.